bigger than it.
Is it?
Yeah. Greater.
Did it get smaller? Or?
You got like.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
Maybe make it like 4x3. Or yeah, that's one.
Okay.
I think so. Okay, yeah, hello, thanks for coming. My name is Tengal. I'm originally based in Manila, but for the past 2 years I've been pretty much homeless, traveling all over the world. No, not really all over the world, just between Southeast Asia, Japan, and Europe. So in my art practice, I work in the field of music, sound, and media arts, and also film. And maybe 70% of the time I work as a producer, cultural producer, doing projects in the region, in the ASEAN region. Maybe later, if we have time, we can talk about like the stuff that we do. So in Manila, I started a collective. Before I used to run an art space, a residency space called Terminal Garden back in 2010. And in 2005, I started a kind of collective of sound artists and people working on audiovisual artworks through performance or installation or this kind of style. And then recently, my organization and 3 other organizations started a new platform which we call NUSASONIC. It comes from the term Nusantara, which means archipelago. And sonic obviously means kind of sound. And the purpose of this new platform was to open up a discourse and more dialogue between Southeast Asian countries in terms of sound cultures. And last year we did a festival in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, which ran for 2 weeks, which had kind of residency type where we paired in different artists from different countries to create new work together, collaborate. Maybe first time they met. Some of the artists were already working together. And then we had multiple stages where people would perform in different days and also lecture and talk. This year we're going to do the festival in Manila around October. The purpose that I'm here in Thailand because I was invited by one of the artists that we invited to Berlin, Takun and Lee, and also Jim, who started a new program that focuses on connecting different musical practices, but not just music, it goes beyond as well, between the region of inviting artists to go to Bangkok. So I'm one of the first people to participate in this new platform. They call it Neighbors, or Neighbors Project. So still very fresh. And then, of course, like here also check what's happening in Bangkok after not being here for 11 years. Thanks to Henry for hosting this talk. I met him last year in Japan when he was in a different program, but it was in the same festival called MeCA, or Media Art Cultures in Asia. He was participating in a bio camp, and I was curating an exhibition there. So, okay, what do I talk about? There's a lot of things that I talk about, but it's going to be a little bit like loose and free. But since last year I was invited to go to Darmstadt, Summer Music Institute, Darmstadt in Germany, which is a very old kind of avant-garde new music festival for 70 years. If you're familiar with these guys like Stockhausen and all these guys, this is the Stockhausen school. And what I noticed there is that this is a big festival that connects America and Europe in terms of contemporary music. However, there's not so much, I would say, apart from Korea, Japan, and China, ASEAN was Southeast Asian kind of involvement. And so this came about with an idea that I has been thinking about for a long time on how like the music today, music cultures could be viewed through the lens of music during the time of dictatorship. So one thing that is common in I'm not so familiar with Thailand, but one thing that's common between Indonesia and Philippines is that we have had like really famous and long regimes. Particularly in the Philippines, it was almost 30 years with Ferdinand Marcos. Maybe you don't know him, but you know his wife, Imelda Marcos, who won the Guinness Book of World Records for collecting the most shoes in the world. And a lot of other things behind that. But so during this, in Indonesia, they had Sukarno and Suharto, like the first two presidents or prime ministers after they negotiated their independence from the Dutch. So this is a pretty much very work in progress. It's not complete. I still don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it was an interesting lens to sort of start thinking about it. So this is just an image of a country, the Philippines. So it's an archipelago like Indonesia. There's more than 7,000 islands. Because of the Spanish influence, and we were under the Spanish for almost 400 years. Predominantly 92% are Christian, 81% are Catholic. There's a very small percentage of Muslims and Buddhist, Taoist, pagan. 10% of the population are non-religious. I belong in the 10%. And there was this NUSASONIC maritime trading route, which is still being contested today, where they claim that people from the north, from China and whatever, they traveled from India, they traveled through boats going to Thailand, the island where Thailand is, to Vietnam, traveling as far as Philippines. Some of them settled there, and then they moved on to Indonesia, even the Fiji Islands. And there was like this trading route around 30,000 years ago. Okay, some important information. We got like our independence from Spain in 1898, and we started our own republic in 1946 after the World War II. This is just a brief history. But the important thing I want to show you here is like the Third Republic, during which there was like after the war. The Fourth Republic is where the dictators, like the one in blue, in brown. This is when this was the Marcoses took over the country for a long time, and now we are in the Fifth Republic, which is maybe you have known, Duterte. They say the Trump of Asia, the guy who hates drug dealers and drugs and stuff. So if you could see like the total modern period is almost at the same time as the Fourth Republic during this time. So there's a lot of interesting things happening during this time. But let's start with like one composer whose name is Jose Maceda. He was born in 1917. He's actually trained as a classical pianist. So he studied in France, in Paris for the conservatory, and he eventually got, involved with the early, like electroacoustic, like the tape music concrete movement in France. So for people who are not familiar, music concrete is when they started to experiment with making music using tape machines. This was before computers or synthesizers. And they would like splice up tape, and then different speeds, record things, and they would have like a bunch of different sounds, and it was kind of revolutionary during this period. So he was also working at that lab for a brief period and got exposed to Western avant-garde movements. Then he decided to go back to the Philippines, and because he got bored. The premise there was he got bored with the idea of the way the West organizes sound. If you think about it, like orchestras are usually all about volume. Why do they have 15 violin players or 10 violin players playing the same thing? Because it's supposed to make it loud. And so they built like these auditoriums where, acoustically treated for people to be able to appreciate each instrument. And so he was more interested in like the East. He was interested in like ethnic groups, people living up in the mountains with their traditions, on how they organize sound. And these people are not musicians, they don't make notations. They play gongs and bamboo buzzers and whatever, kind of like whenever they, harvest maybe, or when somebody's getting married or something like that. So it's part of ritual. And so he decided to use like this Western training and then focus on like this very rooted local, even tribal kind of music. I don't want to say tribal music, but traditional stuff. These are just some of his scores, and these are the instruments that he was working on. So he completely, at one point, he completely changed. He said like, I'm going to be an ethnomusicologist, start writing about these people. So he didn't just write about the Philippines, he also went to Indonesia and in Thailand and other places where he was writing and recording audio from like the 60s until the 70s. So in Manila, we have a big archive of ethnomusicology material from different countries in Southeast Asia. And what he noticed is these people that are playing this kind of music, they're not so focused so much on melody, but they're focused on drone. Similar to, let's say, Indian music, where every time there would be like a drone that would continuously be like a note that would be repeated until it repeats into a drone. So, and for people in the Pacifics, like Indonesia and Philippines, and maybe even Thailand, the gongs were taking this place. So the gongs were played at a certain speed and multiple times, and it created like this resonance and gongs and drones. And so he identified that cultures are identified through melody, and there is a drone. So he wrote a book called Drone and Melody, which is an interesting book. So anyway, he also is a composer. So he was like, oh, why don't you take this idea and make like music out of it? So this score is actually a blueprint of a church, and this church is what they call this a circular church for some strange reason. And he positioned all the musicians in different areas, playing these instruments, playing at certain times, maybe even getting different rhythms, overlapping each other and blurring, different melodies being blurred. So it kind of sounds pretty much like this. Actually, I have a video that I saw online. Maybe we should show that. That could be interesting. Hold on. So during this period, this is Imelda Marcos. I just wanted to show you. Like, look at this. Right? If you just type like Imelda Marcos shoes, you will see like 3,000 pairs. The excess of the regime that still haunts something. So the Marcoses were well known for the extravagant and opulent lifestyle. She was quite a yeah, she's famous for this. What is Imelda Marcos known for? She's known as the steel butterfly, but her extensive shoe collection is world renowned. So, anyway, let me check the video. Where is it? Okay. If I could just get this out here. We could launch it. Oh, fuck. So this was just a recording. I just want to show you that particular piece of the church. Okay, this is the crazy part. This is the church. But listen to the music. Does it sound holy to you?
Chapel sa unang araw nitong Setyembre. Nagpaalala ulit ito sa atin ng mga sinaunang layunin ng musika, ritual, pagsamba.
When was this?
This was in early 2000s, but
2000.
Okay. The point here is, in Europe you could see like I don't know, a metal band playing in an old church that nobody's using. In this particular case, he was able to get like the actual priests to hold a mass while he was doing this music, which was totally, you know, avant-garde and crazy. How did they get to this point? At one point, I will discuss like one particular work done in the 70s. But so during the time of the Marcoses, like Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law, which means it's like a military takeover, where, you know, there are curfews at a certain time, everybody has to be home, and etc. etc. I'm sure people in Thailand are familiar with this. But then eventually, Imelda Marcos was the first lady, and she was like, "Hey, right, what should we do? I will invest in culture and arts." So she started a lot of initiatives during this period. She was like the first lady that was like, you know, into arts and editing. And what the crazier it is, the better. And so Dr. Jose Maceda was in this conflicted kind of identity where, you know, what is Filipino music? Like, the Philippines is an artificial country, but there's like multiple cultures all over the place. But the Marcoses were looking for this kind of identity. Like, we want the Philippine music. What is this? And so Dr. Maceda was able to kind of utilize this opportunity, maybe unconsciously, or maybe he was thinking about it really smart, or maybe he was just lucky, because this is the only thing. I was never able to ask him because he's dead now. But this is something back at home nobody wants to discuss, because it kind of is tarnishing his memory. Like, oh, you mean he conspired or he worked with the dictators? But and so when he was doing this kind of music, it presented a opportunity for the government that was trying to establish the Philippines as a beautiful country, a country of culture and art, etc. We were very famous for our cinema as well. And even in the 70s, during the dictatorship, this is where it was quite interesting, where we had a lot of pornography. Like, there was a lot of pornography. Pornography was legal because it's opium of the masses, actually. So they were thinking maybe we should just let them do a lot of crazy movies. So there was a lot of B movies, and there's a lot of blaxploitation movies. I'm not sure if you know. Do you know the movie Kill Bill?
Yeah.
So this was a movie that was shot in the Philippines during the 70s. It's called Cleopatra Wong, and even Quentin Tarantino directly says that this is an inspiration for Kill Bill. It's about a woman who got wronged and she's about to take her revenge on, you know, whatever. So there's a lot of these movies that were being that was being shot and done in the Philippines during the time of the dictatorship. So it was not just the music. Maybe it's arguable if you talk to some of these older artists that it was a great time for them. This was the best time because you had unlimited funds. You know, you didn't have to struggle. So you could, and they didn't really censor so much. As long as you don't talk about the government, as long as it doesn't represent, you know, like a bad image to the government. The government even commissioned a movie called what is that? Where they had paintings and we had paintings and a bunch of stuff. This is like birth mythology. So, you know, in the Philippine culture, like they said that Adam and Eve, whatever, started from the bamboo. So there was like one bamboo, it opened up, and there was like the man and the woman, and this is their propaganda, which is it's quite interesting. And then they also had a movie, a biopic about them. So, you know, like, wow, they are Adam and Eve in a Catholic country that believes in this thing. And so eventually, a lot of Maceda's projects were, you know, successful because of this, and he started doing more things, which is now we're getting to be a little bit more into detail. This is just some of his scores. I just want to show like some of his research from the books, and in the later part I will discuss how kind of a lot of his theories in a way was prophetic to what is the music now. And this is basically his creative process. So he studies Asian society and cultures, and then, you know, looks into the forms and the structures, and then next the theoretical interpretation, the philosophical interpretation. Then after that, he takes it into consideration his compositional and creative constructs, which he studied from the West. And then he writes a written score. He works with people in communities. He never works with musicians or academic or conservatory musicians because he believes that this type of music was taken from daily life and people, and it should be performed by people. And then he creates a musical event. This particular piece called Cassettes 100, this is a score of 10 parts multiplied by 10, so it becomes 100. And each of the scores, it plays from like 0 to 40 minutes. And so he gathered, like, maybe we should record like these things on tape and get 100 people carrying cassette players, pressing it at the same time, moving around in different, kind of choreographed areas, move around a different space, and perform it. So there's no speakers, nothing, like I created the stage. It was kind of like, even to the West at this time, it was kind of, a different idea. Like, wow, nobody's thought of kind of this thing. And there is, these are images of 1973 performance at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. So the Cultural Center of the Philippines was a project by Imelda Marcos. She said, like, we need to have, the interesting thing about Imelda Marcos, she comes from, I mean, don't get me started with her, but she's a very, very interesting character. And there's like a whole 10-hour, discourse about her. So she comes from a poor family, like a fishing family, who kind of slowly, like slept her way, and at the same time, like did whatever she needed to do to get on top by winning beauty contests, because she was famous for being beautiful. And then, she eventually ended up to the mayor, like becoming the mistress of the mayor, and then the mayor, and then the mayor gave her the beauty queen of that city. And then somehow, worked her way up to be a socialite, and eventually met like this young guy who was quite smart, and like comes from the north, and this guy was Ferdinand Marcos, so she knew that this guy would be the next big thing, and so she managed to seduce him, sorry. And so she would try during their time as Adam and Eve of the Philippines. She would travel all over the world, go to the United States and whatever, and then say, oh, they have like a MoMA, they have this and this, maybe we should have one in the Philippines. So this is the inspiration for Cultural Center of the Philippines. She created like the things that she saw that was cool somewhere else. And so this was done in this performance. And then 2 years ago, they started reenacting this performance in the same venue. But this time, because they could not source cassette players anymore, they found stuff from China that were MP3 players, but essentially the same concept. I'll just show a very short clip. So this was like his vision of like a modern Filipino music. where taking notes and inspiration coming from our ancestors and bringing technology and a modern take on how it is performed and even produced. I just want to show the part in the bottom. The bottom part is the first floor is quite cool. At the same time, there's a lot of imperfections because in some of the machines, like lost battery or somebody pressed accidentally a repeat button, but that's also part of the thing. That is very unpredictable, and the mistakes are part of the performance itself. Quite intense. They would run around or talking to each other as part of the instructions. Okay. And so, oh my God, it's them again. And so, another landmark work of his, which a lot of these works I took as when I was starting my career, kind of as an inspiration or the ideas. What the hell happened there? Sorry. And this is a recording of a piece that he composed in the late '60s called Ugnayan. And Ugnayan means working together, kind of like to connect. And so the music, if you hear it, it's kind of boring. If you listen to it, because it sounds very hard to describe. I think it's like, it sounds music concrete, but the acoustic or something electronic. But essentially, what was interesting here is how it was presented, how it was performed. When they performed it, he, with the help of the government at that time, in 1974, had this idea that, okay, we've done the radios, we've done the cassettes. Maybe we should do radios. And so he commissioned 22 radio stations, basically all of the radio stations in the country, to play one part of the music. So there was like, I think in total there was 24 and then 22 pieces. So one part of the music was played in radio station 1, radio station 2, you get the idea. And then they multiplied the signal on the 2 other stations. And so it was all over the country for 1 hour. And then he said, like, he invited the people, the audience, to come and go out to the parks, to the streets, and bring your transistor radios, bring your portable boom boxes, bring your cars, whatever. So on a Sunday afternoon, in a kind of semi-coordinated way, everybody, there was like thousands of people in parks and streets holding radios. And they would then suddenly, like, this democratize the idea of making music, where the audience gets to choose the volume. In a way, in effect, actively participates in how the music is going to be performed. They also get to choose the channel. And then maybe they walk around and they can hear other people in different channels. And so, the piece was organically created and combined by the people's interaction. I look forward a bit when how it sounds out. no recording on this event. I'm not sure, maybe there is. I don't have access to it. I don't have access to it. You can just imagine like those thousands of people on the streets for 1 hour holding up radios, giant noise orchestra, in a way. That is controlled and dictated by the people. But so the question there is like, that's why this piece was never performed again. It's because who does that? Like, can you just go up to all the radio stations in Thailand and say, hey, can you play 1 hour from your channel? Like, maybe, right? Yeah. So, yeah, good one. Yeah, but so in a way that's why this piece only happened once, and you know it became kind of like a legendary discussion amongst musicians and people. Like, you know, obviously there are things that are omitted from that, but in order to be able to do that, that's why you need dictators. That's why you know, this piece was done because of dictators. Because the wife is into arts. She's like, yeah, sure, I'll call them up. Hey, the wife is calling. What should we do? What we have to pay the commercials and stuff? Just tell her yes. So this piece was quite interesting in that sense. Now going back to my kind of work, I guess I could discuss a bit of it. This was when I obviously ripped off from this idea, taking the inspiration from this idea, but you know, done in a way where okay, we could not afford having 22 radio stations and etc. And because of technology, you know, you're able to build like radio transmitters, kind of cheap radio transmitters. You can even source it in different countries. Build your own antennas. So we decided that we should have a radio jam, and in this area where it's allowed traffic jam. Nowadays people don't have radios anymore, but they have radios in their cars. So maybe we can ask the people to jam as well. So we only had 4 signals, and this is a map of Makati, which is a business district. And this is the area, the Ayala Triangle. This is where we did the transmission, and people going around this triangle, you know, people were sending out flyers and stuff, and we announced it. Yeah, just when you reach this certain area, tune in, and then while they're in traffic, they start to like create this. So it was done with live performers. So we had 4 channels, 4 radio channels, FM radio channels. It was quite interesting. There was a lot of people who showed up as well. This is some of the examples of the people, and you know, people with their boom boxes, they parked around. And this is like the musicians performing. Yeah, okay. So going back to MeCA. A lot of this writing, which I will not really get so too much into detail, involves a lot of the prediction of kind of what he was doing as an example in the 60s and 70s, where taking from communities and then, you know, like as the quote says, to draw attention on the role of music instruments and audio recorders as they play in the communities that they occupy, from traditional village to concert halls, and you know, kind of how this would be able to influence certain new musics. And he even discussed that maybe, you know, like combining, I don't know, Western music with ethnic tradition, this would be possible. Combining the idea of sampling, even the idea of connecting records as an archive and using it as material, meaning the material itself becomes part of the music. So he wrote a lot of things, and you know, to summarize some of it, this kind of gave forth to ethnic rock. It's basically rock with gongs. This was in the 80s by a guy named Bob Abbas. So this began like, and now you can hear this everywhere, like even in techno you have all this. It's it's just common now. But you know, back during this time when he was writing his ideas about these concepts, it was kind of predictive. And this is an example of a culture assimilating another culture. This is a Japanese group called Gangan Series. Maybe some of you are familiar with this anime. It's called Akira. It was done in the late 80s. It was actually a manga about a cyberpunk thing, dystopian future, etc. Where there's a bunch of people with telepathy that could ruin people's lives and control things and etc. And this was the director decided to work with this group who was appropriating a particular culture on very, very tiny culture in Eastern Bali. In this Eastern Bali, the Gamelan Jacob, which if you're familiar with gamelan, it's gong orchestra, drums and etc. But this particular tribe, this particular group, town and village in the eastern part of Bali, they were ignored by the royalty, so they decided like, fuck gongs, we're gonna make everything in bamboo. And so when I don't know how this actually happened, but I remember there's a connection. One of the guys from Gano went to Bali in the 70s and then discovered this tradition. And he was so he fell in love that he said like, we want to appropriate this and become. So suddenly in pop culture, people can hear this music when they connected it with synthesizers. And then the Japanese were making a lot of synthesizers at that time that were able to tune, apart from Western scales, but to the scales of the gamelan. So let's hear the iconic soundtrack. Seeing the opening credits for this with like all these spiders in like futuristic Tokyo with this soundtrack, it was like I quite remember. This is a video in Japan, taking the 90s. This is how the instruments look like. These are all Japanese people, by the way. It sounds like the steel drum, like tropical and stuff. But they were supposed to be like emulations of the gamelan. And okay, there's a bunch of stuff that we don't have enough time, but I'll discuss briefly on the period of Sukarno. So the old rule, which is a Sukarno, and he negotiated from the Dutch, like Indonesia should be a country, and then they decided to unite for the first time. But Indonesia, like the Philippines, is more islands. It's much bigger. They even have Papua, and then split in half. It's Papua New Guinea. It's so vast and so diverse in terms of culture. And even like the example I showed you is just very Balinese, but a very particular Balinese, meaning like Bali gamelan music is not like that. You will never hear this except for like a tiny section. And what happened there is like, because Sukarno it's either he was not sure that Indonesian people would be ready for Western influence, or he just didn't want Western influence when they were trying to build a nation. So what he did was, during this period, which is the opposite of what the Marcoses did, they said like, yeah, copy everything, let's do something, let's go to Moma and bring them all here. The Indonesian dictator was afraid of the West, because they just came out of like 400 years of Dutch rule, and they're so diverse. There's so many different cultures in Indonesia, so many different islands, and they were afraid to sort of like get influenced too much by the West. So they decided to close the door, so to speak, and develop and focus more on Indonesian things. However, there was I'll just show one example about this group. This is quite funny. So before I play this song, Garapuspita was a group that were active in the 50s, early 60s, and they were like, an all-female rock group. Like this was them, yeah. And they were able to get away with a lot of things during the time of Sukarno, simply because they were women. Like, what that means is like the government and like the main men there didn't really take them seriously. Yeah, they're just girls playing guitars. It's okay.
What do you mean by like they can get away with?
That's exactly what I'm trying to explain. Meaning like the men look down on them. Meaning like this is not a threat, because they were playing rock music, maybe a little bit too loud rock music. And because they were women, they were like, they're like, let's not take them seriously. So they were able to like kind of steal some music from the West, they integrated it into their sets, into their songs, under the nose of the government, which was banning the Western music, rock and roll influence. They didn't want people to be going out in the streets and having long hair, etc. And so this song, I don't need to explain which song this is, but you will hear it. So this is the Rolling Stones.
But you love the money, hey, 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 hey. Ikaw ako rin sini, hey, 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 hey. Kasi tayo bergembira bersama-sama hilangkan hati. Boleh dua-duaan, asal tetap berlingkaran, tapi awas jangan pergi berdua.
So yeah, so obviously it's the Rolling Stones. I can get no satisfaction, right? But none of the government leaders knew that song, because they weren't even able to like get the records, because the records were stuck. And so the Hospital was quite smart to like, hey, let's introduce Western music by copying riffs and then sing like songs about Indonesia. So this was kind of like their creative way of getting like people to do rock and roll. And because like, as I said, at that time the government didn't really pay too much attention on them, simply because they were women. they got away with a lot of stuff. So they played around with this newfound immunity in some sense. Anyway, you could further search more about Pita. They have great music. I like their music actually. And
Do they have a big following? Is it a lot of people like them?
no, at that time no, because they were like, you know, oh, it's all girl bands like in the 60s. What are they doing? It's a Muslim country, yeah. And they're not wearing their hijab. They're wearing like short dresses. You know, okay, let them play, yeah, sure. But the interesting part of it is that nowadays, like to find a record of this would cost you $300 US. Now because suddenly all the hipsters were like, oh shit, that was like, you know, like suddenly it created a new following, and so they are kind of reviving, reuniting again. And I think this is them now. Yeah, this is them now. They're still alive, all of them. So yeah, this is them now. And they have a Facebook group. I follow them on Instagram. You know, like they kind of like started to get into, which is quite cute and cool. But yeah, so there's a lot of these. This is one classic example of the music that was created in Indonesia. And then going back to the previous example I was showing, this very obscure gamelan jegok from Eastern Bali. Because of their kind of being so insular and like, you know, being not connected to the rest of Indonesian music, like they kind of they became the most famous experts in the 80s when the Japanese group started to assimilate and appropriate their culture and then integrate it in their other musics. And so I never even heard that there was this kingdom, or there's this village. I just thought it was Japanese, you know, like that was the thing when I was younger. And so there has been like two ways. So actually the Indonesian influence and the music that were happening there was kind of a bit more complex than, say, the Philippines during the dictatorship, because there's like groups like Daratus Pita where they would, you know, create, you know, because of the newfound immunity, they started to integrate. And you could go even further into some of their songs, like they even have like parts of the Beatles, you know, it's just like, it's going crazy. Like nobody's gonna, like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles are never gonna, you know, like Warner Brothers is never going to go to Indonesia and say, hey, you should stop making these records. So this was like an interesting way of work around through copyright, and at the same time work around through censorship. And then there's also the other parts where Indonesian music was so influential because they decided to become very, how do I say, to assimilate kind of other cultures that are close to Indonesia, which is like Indian music. And you have the Mulam here, but they have like the Dangdut, which is which personally I find hilarious. Maybe we can find the track here. System of a Down. You know, this is a band. It's a rock band. Wait. Let's go to YouTube.
These terrible shots.
What is a famous song? This is America. Koplo Dangdut. Yeah, this is the best one. I think it's better than the original song. Versions of like famous songs, like Frozen, like, you know, like Let It Go. There is a couple of versions. But so that particular sound, like back in the late 80s, when they were a little bit more free, I guess. It was only during the old rule, during Sukarno time, when they were still strict. But then during Suharto period, they kind of opened up a bit, and they took a very obvious influence for their pop culture, which comes straight from India. So that's why this drum kind of sounds like a tabla, which they have it. It's also a Sudanese, which is an instrument that is pretty common in the eastern part of Indonesia. But the way that they play it, it's kind of like in between a conga and a tabla, because they could pull a string and change the tone. This is a cover. Because it was kind of more, we need a new pop culture, a pop music thing, which doesn't sound too West. The Indians, So and then this is also kind of funny. People just covering songs from like famous American rock bands playing this instrument. And so now suddenly, like, because of like opening of the doors, they got so crazy. But they got very, very good at their own instruments. That's why I think in Indonesia it's still, like, compared to the rest of Southeast Asia, they're the ones that are deeply rooted into their tradition. Meaning they play their gongs, they play their drums, and they put it in their pop music. Like in other countries in Southeast Asia, you don't really see that so much anymore. Strong influence, and this is just like a kid covering System of a Down, which is an American Armenian band, a rock band in the States, and playing this with the instrument that he knows, not the drums, this one. So that's why Indonesia is still very attractive to most people, because you go there and you can still see like, oh wow, they're so deeply rooted to this, but adding guitars and maybe a rock singer and whatever. It's because like during that time when they were forced to just focus on what is Indonesian, what is the instruments that they should be playing. And so, yeah, this is what some of those strange kind of modern day results. I just want to show like the drum, why it kind of sounds like a talking drum or a tabla, because if you look at the guy's feet, he pulls a string. Small string that their toes they tie to their toes, and then every time he pulls it, that's why they sit like that. Every time he pulls it, it stretches the skin of the drum, and it changes the tone. So it has like a do dang. That's why the dangdut comes from this. It comes from this particular drum. Yeah. Okay. I'll just finish like the other things in the Philippines, and then I think we could just talk. But this could go on forever. But And so, yeah, of course, in hip hop in the Philippines, there's also an obvious influence of Maceda with this particular. Oh, it's sleeping. This guy who is from Manila, and he started to. He's a hip hop guy, but he used samples of the archive. He used the samples of the archive to make music, because this, like, 90s, 80s hip hop really was like rooted in sampling, making new music from existing music. And then, of course, and in some sense where some of what Maceda was using, how he used the tapes and how he describes the actual tools that we used to record, music for ethnomusicology purposes could be like a way of expanding a new musical language, which he's directly talking about sampling. And obviously, in the late 80s and 90s, hip hop was born from the States and in the Philippines, because there was a connection between the two, because there was a lot of Filipinos that moved to America after World War II, and they always hung out with the African American community. So they were like DJs or whatever. I don't know if you know DJ Qbert. Do you know this guy? Like the most famous DJ in the world, at least in the 90s.
Is this some of the Black Eyed Peas?
Yeah, he's also Filipino. So DJ Qbert, he used to be part of the Beastie Boys and all of this shit. But he's fucking Filipino. He grew up in America. I mean, he's proud. Look at him. So these guys were like back in the late 80s and 90s when they were doing like hip hop turntable like culture in America. How is this intro? I think he lives in LA or something. So this kind of style of playing, like this guy back in the time, he was one of the best. Like the turntablism. Yeah, this sound, classic. Produce some tracks with the Beastie Boys or whatever. That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. And eventually, like, there was one thing that this is just me kind of maybe assuming a bit, but his idea of focusing on his music as well as writing. When he was writing, Maceda was writing a lot of things that kind of destroyed the idea of melody. Meaning like the focus should not be about melody, because melodies represent cultures. So I don't want to be a culture. I want to be like an every culture. So his music was blending all the melodies to make a confusion. There's even a famous piece that he calls Colors Without Rhythm, which is done with. This is not 1998. This is just published in 1998. Which he used Western instruments. So let's just forward this. in the 60s. So why I'm talking about this guy is because like this guy has been doing stuff parallel in the part of the world where nobody really looks into, which is Southeast Asia. Now, yeah, they do, but a lot of the things that he was doing and a lot of the influences or ideas he was writing kind of, for me, is, you know, predictive of what is happening now. But nobody knows that guy. He kind of died, nobody knew him. And just recently it started to become an attention to most people. Like suddenly there was like, oh, we should investigate Maceda's work and etc. So a lot of like, and some of the basic stuff there, like melodies without colors without rhythm, meaning like melodies represent cultures, therefore I should blur all the melodies to create non-cultural things. And he's always writing it in an academic way. And this is essentially what a lot of people eventually ended up doing. He did not say that, you know, this is the future, etc., but it kind of was in some sense kind of like a prophecy or a prediction. And this is a guy from the Philippines who builds his own instruments and made from, he's a sculptor, but basically made from, I don't know, bicycle parts, random stuff that he finds, kitchen material, spoons, forks. He's kind of comes from more like a punk background.
So they make music out of this culture. That's the one thing that's very unique about it. The combination of performance and sculpture and architecture. So people can imitate, people can try.
This group, his name is Salvador, and he has a group called Elemento, which means element. And yeah, these are some of his works. And at the same time, it's also like what I like about Southeast Asia in a sense where there's a lot of people like him, not just in Indonesia and other parts. I know there is a Cambodian or Vietnamese guy who also does stuff. But because they can't afford Ibanez or guitars, they start to just take shit from the garbage and build their own, which creates a whole new discourse of music. Like this guy. They were active in the early 90s. The last thing I want to show you is there's a lot of stuff, but this one I think was more relevant to the discussion. And so, in 2013, the ethnomusicology department, which was founded by Dr. Maceda, was doing a retrospective of his work. And then, you know, there was like some great idea to make a connection. So on the top floor of the museum, they said like, they invited a few artists to make a reaction or like based on these concepts or ideas and influence, maybe indirectly or directly. And so I was thinking of a piece of what to do, and I saw this filing cabinet in their office where they use it for filing. Which ethnic group is this? Yeah, the flutes. Yeah, whatever. And so I decided to make an interactive art piece, which took away all the index cards, and you know, why don't we just let people listen to the archive and remix it while they are playing. Oops, shit, sorry. So this is the graduated in 2013. Sorry, this is just what it looks like in electrical engineering terms. But you know, that piece, essentially I cut up parts of the archive, you know, small bits where it can be looped. And if you have some musicality and whatever, then you get to learn like how to play it, so it becomes essentially an instrument. It detaches the person from just looking as a viewer of an artwork, and becomes like an active participant, very much influenced by Marcela's ideas. But yeah, there's a lot more stuff, but I think this is good enough. Thank you.
How about the workshop?
Oh yeah, the workshop was great. Yeah. Anyway, did anybody have any questions?
What sounds did you sample at the workshop?
No, we didn't sample anything. We amplified sounds from objects that they saw. So it was a bunch of, you know, things that we picked up from the street that maybe bought in the junk shop or in the electronics store, where, you know, it could make an interesting sound. Pieces of back pocket, just like putting it there in one table and then asking people, okay, you just build an instrument now. And, show them the examples, and they had. I don't have videos here on this computer. I have it on my phone, but yeah, they started to build collaboratively, kind of like a new instrument, so to speak. And then they played it together in a graphics score that I made.
Do you think that the center ever heard of John Cage, or John Cage ever heard of him?
This is a big question because they never wrote about each other. I know also John Cage at almost the same time was doing the same thing, or kind of similar ideas, working with the radios as well, working with turntables and mediums of recording and playback. But yeah, it's a question that nobody really knows. Actually, I can maybe investigate it further to the people that work with Marcela directly, but as far as I know, maybe they were not aware of each other. Because after leaving Paris, he just stayed in the Philippines and started the ethnomusicology department, and was very busy for 40 years, writing about academic papers about rice rituals or this and that, or whatever. Always viewing it, but I want to leave something that he did say, and this was a discussion that was brought up to me whenever people like us who live in the city discuss subcultures. But he did write about in an interview he said, like, everything that I'm doing is essentially a contribution to Western music history, because the people up in the mountains, they don't write notation, they don't annotate, they don't put it in this kind of perspective of something that I've studied in the West. But at the same time, like, he posed a question of like, what does this got to do with rice and coconuts? Like all of these papers and the notations and I think what he was trying to say there is, like, with new cultures or subcultures, we have to just listen. I think inherently and more accurately or closer to the ground, something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was kind of a workaround on how you approach, between the fetishizing and the voyeuristic part of a subculture, and using it and integrating it as part of your artwork.
It was really interesting to see the combination of art show space and music together, especially when Jose was composed on circular church space.
Yeah.
And, did he have an idea in advance when he found the church, or like is it opposite that he inspired by the shape of the church and he was composed to show that?
No, I think the church, the structure itself, maybe was accidental. I mean, he wanted to actually, what he wanted to do was to play his music during a mass, during an actual ceremony with priests and people praying. And the title of the piece is called Pagsamba, like meaning to pray, but it's contested. Like, depends on what this beautiful music theory is. But it sounds like music from Satan, like something like this, right? It's not very holy, but And this church was inside the University of the Philippines, where he works in the conservatory. So this was like much closer to, in terms of negotiating. So it was maybe easier for them to be able to do that. I remember that he was able to do it as well in different places, in different churches. Once that they did this prototype there, suddenly all the churches were like the bishops, oh yeah, do that, do me too, do me.
But by Basilica type, they have to compose in different ways.
Yeah, I think that, but the score that I showed you, so I think like he did in some way, because of the idea, I wanted to make a mass, a play in a mass. Then this was the university church, and they were open. I'm gonna compose for that. So because he arranged it in a way where I think you can see it. Oops, sorry, what am I doing? I'm going to another way. Yeah, so he composed it in this way, like the circular church, and this is the score. So it goes from like 1, 2, 3 plays there, 4 plays there. So there's groups of people who are in these locations. 5 plays there, 6. So kind of like, and then I don't really know. This is like section 1, 2. I don't really know how this works completely with the colors. And the people who study him are more familiar with how the actual intricacy of the score itself. But yeah, it's obviously aimed for this church. Actually, if I can show you the.
And also the shape. Can I say something about? Do you know anything about the length of the pieces? It's almost like eternity, it's a mandala or whatever. It's a certain space.
What is this? So yeah, this is the church. Church of the Risen Lord. Yeah.
And also it's also acoustic, like a circular space to make this echo.
Yeah, I think when they were rehearsing, they started to discover that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I forgot to mention about Maceda, a lot of his works, like to answer your question, sounds like very chance, like very like John Cage kind of style. But this is where John Cage and Maceda are different, because he was very specific. Like you have to play it the way it's written. There is no option for chance. It sounds like random stuff, but it is actually very much pre-planned. Like I showed the notations earlier, and their set of instructions, even how people should walk. He was very much like a dictator in this regard. Like, although there would be like certain moments where, and it's all timed. Like this is all like sort of like sections and minutes of the piece. And this is like the church you're talking about, location plan of the performers. This one represents the singers as people. This dot represents 100 performers of 5 types of percussion instruments, either whistle, buzzle, sticks, blah, blah, blah. And these dots, they should be there. The X are the gongs. The rectangle are the 5 male choirs, and triangles are the 8 gongs, the bigger gongs. So he was very much detail-oriented and very specific. And there's even stories where he would be, what do you call this? He would like invite people in the house, in his house and stuff, and like, you know, just ordinary people that were going to play, to rehearse, and kind of like, okay, let's listen to your part. And talking about 600 people, like why do you have to micromanage everyone, right? But then he does say that there is some options for chance and mistakes, and this is part of the piece. But you know, if you cannot play it as it is written, it's okay. But it's not random. It's not aleatoric music like John Cage, where he favors more of like, you know, the idea of chance and probability. Yeah. Any other questions?
That's great.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Jริงๆมันก็มีอะไรคล้ายๆกับไทยพวกไทยบ้าง